Hello, and welcome back to part 8 of this Soul Level 1 run. I think the plan that I have for today is just kind of clearing out Fair Missoula and just getting myself situated up until the end game. Um, so getting up till like Horaloo or the Elden Beast and Radagon, and then from there I probably will start taking on all of the side bosses, so like Melania or Moog or Placidusax or bosses like that. But I kind of want to just beeline it to the end of the game, just so I can get all of the equipment that I would want, and then after this is just going to be basically a boss rush until the end of the game. First to do that though, we kind of need to get through Fair Missoula, defeating the Godskin Duo, and then defeating Maliketh, and then continuing on from there. Now we have one of the bosses where I've kind of had the most concerns about. Not sure exactly how great this one's going to go. We have the Godskin Duo. This boss is obviously kind of stupid. It is a gank boss fight between the Godskin Apostle and the Godskin Noble. It's helped out by the fact that you can put one of them to sleep and then fight one-on-one for a minute before the other one wakes up, and then you can just repeat that process. But they have a large HP, they do a lot of damage, and honestly, fighting either of them is kind of a pain. So I think it's really going to be dependent on how easy it is if the bleed does percentage-based damage on the individual HP bar of the Godskin Duo, or if it does it the percentage damage across the entirety of the Godskin Duo. I think that's going to be the real determining factor of how hard this is going to be. But this first try, let's see. Using arrows to just put them to sleep. Only takes 3 arrows, nice. It does percentage of just the individual, that's not great. Oof. Ow. Still healing. Okay, what? Looks like the fat one's back up again. Oh, that hit the skinny one. That hit the light. Oh, not good. Kind of want to heal, but unfortunately, this guy's chasing me. It's definitely harder to put him to sleep the second time. Ah, didn't dodge backwards. This is gonna be a while. The bleed and frost, as you can see, only does a percentage of the individual HP, which means it does basically 1/4 the damage it would normally do. This is gonna take a while. The Godskin Duo, or as I like to call them, the Foreskin Duo. There's a lot of problems with this fight, specifically because it's a gank, but honestly, after doing it at SL1, I've actually gained a little bit of respect for this fight. It's hard, and it isn't really a great fit for a Souls formula. Generally, you kind of want to build a boss where you can get all up in their face and just dodge all their attacks. That's generally what's the most fun, but it has actually a few upsides that you can't really get from a lot of other boss fights. At this point in the game, you've already fought two of each of these bosses individually, so you already know the moveset and how to deal with each boss in an isolated condition. The main struggle really comes from fighting them together when their attacks can overlap each other. So you can't just employ the same strategy that you used to fight both of them individually to fight them both together. The strategy from before, for the noble at least, was to use parries. Just get up in his face and just parry every single attack he throws at you. And then for the Apostle, it was just stick close, dodge his attack, and then counter with like a quick like slice or something like that. And most of his other things can be pretty easily dodged. Now with them both playing on the field, sticking close to either one of them and trying to use either of those strategies really is just asking to get hit. Instead, you kind of need to use a new strategy, and that is to keep a distance. Slowly whittle them down, and most importantly, use sleep. Use any sort of debuff you can get, and most importantly, sleep. Using sleep arrows or sleep pots will allow you to only fight one-on-one from like the same one-on-ones from before, or you can put both of them to sleep and then burst them with like different pots of like bleed or frost or whatever you want to use. As long as you are patient and don't try to fight them while they're both awake, the fight actually can be pretty interesting. It's kind of like making sure you can time yourself so that both of them aren't awake at a single time and make it more manageable. Instead of the in-your-face dodge every attack that most Souls bosses force you into, the duo makes you play a very passive game, and the use of status effects that every other boss is immune to. In a way, this change of pace makes them a little bit more fun to fight. Still kind of an annoying gank, but a better one. Now, since this run has no weapon upgrades, bows do like no damage, so you can't really just rely on using a bow and dodging away and trying to kill them through that. We're gonna bring them down to like maybe 3/4 of their HP with a full set of arrows. And you can't really get close to apply bleed or frost with your weapon without just getting hit in return. So instead, I resorted to using the bleed and frost pots to apply the status effects at range. It also works out well that they will oftentimes just stand still, where you can just kind of lay into them with like a few pots. Or, if they're just fully asleep, you can just keep throwing them until they wake up. This allows you to stack multiple instances of bleed or frost in a short time span, making it a much shorter fight than, what normally would be from range. And you get a pretty good amount of damage out with that. I've also used the Rot Dragon Breath just to squeeze out a little bit more damage than just the pots. The Rot lasts for a really long time and can add up to quite a bit of damage. They pretty much lack resistance to every single debuff in the game. Why not use all of them? The spell, though, is a bit harder to cast. It has a pretty long charge time, so you kind of need to make sure that either you're far away from them, or probably the safest solution is just put them to sleep and then hit them from there. It works really well, actually, if you do it at the beginning of the fight, when you can put both of the Noble and Apostle to sleep, like in close proximity to each other, so that you can hit both of them with a Rot Breath and get basically 2 stacks of the Rot Breath right at the beginning of the fight. Maximum damage. As you can see, I also had a few poison arrows that I had just in case. I never really found the time to use them, but honestly, if you want to, the more debuffs you can apply to them, the easier this fight will be. Now, since the main way to take on the fight is using the sleep status effect, you kind of need to find a way to apply that. Now, you can either use sleep arrows or sleep pots, which is kind of what I've been using, or you can use Trinia's sword. The sword requires you to get kind of close and use the weapon art for it, and also requires FP to cast. But getting close in this fight is not really good, and it's kind of the reason why we want to use sleep in the first place, is so we don't have to do that. So I'd kind of advise against using the sword. But the arrows and the pots, on the other hand, require St. Trinia's lilies. They are kind of annoying to farm. I think there's only 2 locations in the game where you can actually like farm them infinitely. One of them is with the Clean Rot Knights in Caelid, which is already a pain in the ass. Or there are 3 jellyfish that are up on the mountaintops that you can farm that have an 8% drop rate for the lilies. So at least you don't really need too many lilies. I think it's 8 lilies for or 1 lily for 8 arrows. So you don't have to farm too much for them, but it is still like if you want to fight them a decent amount, you kind of have to farm a bit there. Overall, with this fight, I'm honestly pleasantly surprised with how the fight went and how it actually works after doing it in SL1. I came into this fight dreading it, as it was one of, if not the most annoying fights when I was in my first run. But after understanding that this isn't a dodge and then counterattack fight, like every other Souls boss, it's a ranged war of attrition. It started to actually become kind of enjoyable to fight. As long as you put them to sleep, it isn't half bad. Now, something you kind of see towards the end of this is that I just keep shooting arrows into them instead of trying to throw pots or do anything else, and they aren't being put to sleep even though I'm filling them with tens of arrows. They keep just charging at you. After every single time you affect a boss with a debuff or something like that, they'll become more resistant to it. I think up to 3 stacks of it. So the first time you try to put them to sleep, it'll be 4 arrows to put them to sleep. But the third time you try to put them to sleep, it'll be 10 arrows to try to put them to sleep, which kind of burns through your arrows really quickly. But then also towards the end of this fight, I kind of found myself almost panicking a little bit because they were so low. And I was kind of running out of heals and supplies and stuff like that, so I kind of just decided to take it a very careful and just shoot arrows at them. I was completely just going for damage at the end there with the sleep arrows, although I probably should have switched to the poison arrows that I had in store. But regardless, if you ever get them pretty low and you want to play it careful, using the bow for damage can work. It's not great. It does 50 damage per hit, and they have 8,000 HP or so, but can add up. Overall, it's a pretty fun fight actually. The more and more I fought this, the more and more I seem to like it. It's got a different fighting style than most other bosses in this game, and I think that has its merits to it. There are things that can be improved here and there, maybe do it, but a one-on-one boss fight, maybe then that would make sleep a little bit too overpowered, but still enjoyable, not too terrible, not a half bad boss fight. God damn. That was a lot easier than I was expecting, honestly. Just being able to put them to sleep and then inflicting bleed, frost, and just repeating the process. That, I think that took me less than 10 attempts. That was surprisingly easy for how painful I thought this boss was going to be. But, yeah, it's just keep putting him to sleep with arrows. I almost ran out of arrows. I mean, gonna be honest, towards the end there, wasn't doing arrows for sleep. I was just doing it for the extra little bit of damage. But you could do a lot of damage with a combination of just bleed, freezing, and then the dragon's breath or the rot. But that is the rest of Fair Missoula open, and now we have Maliketh. One of my favorite bosses, but also one of the bosses that always gave me the hardest time. So it was gonna be interesting.
Ah, I see you finally made it here yourself. The city hanging in the air is slowly crumbling. What an incredible place we find ourselves. But that aside, I can't believe you felled that giant. It was practically a god. I doubt there's another soul out there who could have done the same. Of course, I count myself, the great Alexander, among the many. Which means I've but one thing to ask of you. Would you kindly undertake my ordeal? Come and tell me when you're ready. I've been longing to fight a warrior as accomplished as you. You are ready then, I take it? Then let us begin. I am the great Jar Warrior, Iron Fist Alexander. Lend me strength, O warriors within. Let us become one champion together.
Oh, all right then. Can I don't know if I can get back up. Oh no. What have I done? What have I done? Well, I can teleport away, but shit. Let's see. I think it's here.
I am the great Jar Warrior, Iron Fist Alexander. Lend me strength, O warriors within. Let us become one champion together.
Just keep running away, and then go in for a single jumping heavy. Then you can do that. Charge 2 heavies like that. Shouldn't be too hard. It's pretty standard jar move set, which makes it easy to punish him. 2 full charged heavies and 1 jumping heavy is all that it takes to stagger him. Maybe not that time. But, there we go. Sorry, Alexander.
As I suspected, victory was impossible. This vessel was found lacking. My thanks. I knew you were the stuff of champions. It was a marvelous battle. I implore you, take what I bequeath from inside me. All vessels are destined to one day break. But the great Alexander lived as a warrior to his last.
Gotta love Alexander. Alright, well, take this to Jar Barum.
Oh, hello again, cuz. No, I haven't changed my mind. I'll begin my journey once I'm ready to go, as a warrior jar, in search of glory. Wow. Cuz, are these insights from Uncle Alexander? Thank you, cuz I'm a warrior jar, so I need to be strong. I can really have them, right? I understand. I'll get strong. Strong enough. I deserve to have Uncle's insights. I don't think I'll see you again. When I set out. Warriors are supposed to work alone. Goodbye, cuz. And thanks for everything. I'll never forget you, cuz. I'll...
Companion jar. This should make all of the pots we throw a little bit more potent, which should help with the fetid and freezing pots that we have. Hopefully that allows it to build up faster. Might be able to do more damage out of them then. But I don't know if I quite will be using it, since I already do have a pretty... I already kind of know what I'm doing with all the charms, so... It's nice to have, though. And because why not? Let's just show me killing the second Draconic Tree Sentinel. Um, the first time I fought this dude, I kind of went for more parries, and then just hitting him with heavy attacks afterwards. But honestly, trying to parry the Draconic Tree Sentinel is very risky. If you miss the parry, it almost is an insta-kill. I think if you have quite a few buffs or preventions, you can take at least one hit with the, if you miss the parry. But it's honestly just better to try to use debuffs in range because he can be affected by, I think, every single debuff except sleep. But I wouldn't even use sleep for this really. Um, but honestly, I just kept throwing pots at him. Freezing pots, bleeding pots, dodging everything that he throws at you, and just staying at range. So a few times where I use parries and stuff like that, but honestly, most of the time, it's just safer to stay at range. A lot of his ranged attacks are not as threatening as his melee attacks. Um, you can pretty easily dodge them, and especially with the fact that this is like near end game, he has a lot of HP. So you would have to successfully parry probably like 100 times or so, which, considering it's not a really an easy task to parry him, uh, it's you're probably not going to get it done. Now, you can technically just run past him. He takes, I think, like 5 seconds or so to actually like start attacking at once he notices you. So you can just run past him and get to Maliketh. But I mean, he drops a set of armor, and it's also just, I don't know. I don't have the security of mind to just run past him every single time. I'd rather just kill him, get him out of the way, and kind of just get a just easier run that I can't mess up, even though it's hard to mess that up. And finally, we're on to Maliketh. This boss, I'm unsure how much this is gonna be a challenge. I remember in my original runs, this boss absolutely brutalized me, but I've always found this boss incredibly fun. I've always enjoyed Maliketh. He's probably one of my favorite bosses in this fucking game. So I'm assuming this is probably going to be one of the longest attempts out of any boss, but also probably one of the most fun. Probably will use some sort of like proper level practice, just because it's been a while since I fought him. But again, not too much, just enough to survive, at least in the first phase, and then get to second phase mostly.
Thou who approacheth destined death, I will not have it stolen from me again.
It's always brutal. I like how you can hear the clink of metal underneath his armor, kind of showing that his face transformation exists. Ah, lost visual on him and couldn't see where I needed to dodge. He does give a decent amount of openings in his phase 1 that I've learned, so hopefully it shouldn't be too bad. Just gotta worry about how easily he can be bled and frosted. And now we have Maliketh. This is gotta be the most over-the-top boss fight that FromSoft has ever done in any of their Souls games. And I am completely fine with that. His moveset, especially in Phase 2, is an absolute spectacle to watch. It really does feel like it's a dance between you and him, and it's just so much fun going through all of his movesets because it's just you're able to apply a lot of pressure while he's also able to do the same in return, and it's just constant action, and it's what a boss fight really should be aiming towards. The only thing that I would critique about this boss fight is actually that his phase 2 HP is really low. It feels like it's almost a glass cannon contest between you and him. His damage is really high, enough to almost one, if not two shot, even properly leveled characters, but because his HP pool is, for phase 1 and phase 2 are the same, and he transforms at half HP, his phase 2 HP pool is very small. So you can almost speed run through it, and I kind of wish they were separate HP pools so you could experience phase 2 a little bit longer. But past the fact that I kind of just want to fight him more, this is probably my favorite fight of all Souls games. Like, I don't know if there's another boss fight that can contend with it. There are a few that I can think of, but this is just, it's so much fun to fight Maliketh. In phase 1, Maliketh attacks in very quick succession, so there are not really a lot of times where you can just get in and keep putting pressure on him and using iframes to dodge his attacks. So instead of, keeping the pressure, you need to find a different strategy, which is keep at range. You can either stay a bit farther away, as his range is quite small, so you really don't have to stand too far away when his attacks will just not hit you, or you can stick really close to him and try to get to his left or right where like the hitboxes won't connect with you. The second one is a little bit harder to do, as he likes to move back and forth, or front and back, pretty often, so trying to get in those little tiny spots right up to his side where the dagger doesn't hit you is kind of hard, and a lot of times you'll mess it up and just get punished. It's a lot of effort, and it's just easier to stay further away. Now, in staying further away, a great use is the pots. Using frost pots, using the bleed pots to get a little bit of extra damage out. At this level, all of your damage is coming from status effects. Swords are going to do like maybe 100 damage, and bosses have like 10 to 20,000 HP. It's going to take way too long to try to just out damage him with anything other than status effects. Now, when using pots, they work really well since he's a very large target, but he does like to move back and forth a lot, and because of this, he can a lot of times move out of range of just throwing pots normally with lock on. So to try to be able to actually land pots effectively in his phase 1, you kind of need to get a handle of free aiming and just kind of unlocking, throwing the pot a little bit higher than what a lock on would, so you can actually land the shot. Frost Claws also work pretty well in this fight, a lot less so in phase 1 because of the fast succession. You can't really get in close to him, but there are still many opportunities, especially when he drags his sword along the ground, that he kind of just stays still and allows you to get in like 5 or 6 hits before he backs out. Something that I've noticed though in his first phase is that his chest is quite high off the ground, even though like the cloth that he's wearing kind of seems like there's a lot of stuff to hit in the front of him. There's a lot of times I find where, especially with like short range weapons like the claws, you can kind of just whiff, even though you're like standing right up next to his hitbox. So sometimes you might need to jump, but oftentimes it's just best to try to move off to the side of him and just try to hit his back legs to guarantee the hit. While also this puts you in a better spot to dodge his next attack, so all works out. This first phase is pretty much all just about patience. He has very fast hitboxes, so trying to apply pressure will just kind of lead to getting hit. Another strategy that I could have used is using Redmane's Flame to stagger him. Redmane's Flame does 40 poise damage, and Maliketh only has 70 poise health, so 2 hits with Redmane's Flame will lead to a stagger and a riposte. This will basically allow you to stun lock him and keep him permanently in a riposte state. It's kind of broken, but I choose not to use this for 2 main reasons. First off, since it's an Asher War, it uses FP, and with the riposte, I don't really do much damage because I don't have leveled weapons, so it's probably going to run out of FP before I actually get to phase 2, and then I would just be back to using the pots. Second reason is because I just don't think stun locking the boss is that fun or challenging. So I choose to fight the boss in at least a somewhat more respectable way. It's a great thing about Souls games is that honestly they're only as hard as you make them. Even without doing challenge runs like these, you can have a lot of opportunities to just make the game easier for yourself. There's summoning phantoms, there's spirit ashes like Black Knife Piche or Mimic Tear that just kind of destroy bosses. Int builds in general. Mages are very strong in this game. All of these are ways that you can just make the game easier if you choose to use them. But you can do the opposite and choose to not use them and make the game harder for yourself. It's kind of the point of these challenge runs. I prefer to make most of these games as hard as I can to beat so that I know that when I do beat it, it was because I was just that good instead of using some one-hit strat or some cheese strat. It's just personal preference, but, whatever makes the game more fun for you. Now, Phase 2 for this fight has a slight strategy shift from Phase 1. Attacks are a lot less frequent, so applying pressure is now viable again, and his speed greatly increases, so landing pots is honestly not really feasible anymore. You're probably just going to miss most of the time, and with his high HP pool, you're already probably running out. So I basically just rely on the Frost Claws for the entirety of Phase 2. His Phase 2 moveset gains a lot of tricky attacks to dodge. However, his attack pattern is very predictable, and a lot of his worst attacks are only used if you aren't positioned properly. So you can kind of just put yourself in a position around him to make sure that you draw out the attacks that are better to dodge. Sticking close to him just prevents a lot of attacks from actually being seen in his Phase 2. The two hardest attacks that I found to dodge are the spherical AoE attack, what I'll probably just call the Destined Death attack, and the front flip attacks. The front flip attacks will only come out after the sword jab into the ground, where he kind of lands on his sword, and it'll only happen if you're too far out in front of him. So if you dodge the AoE, like the ground AoE, into him and like stay right up next to him in that, he'll never pull it out, and you'll never see it, so you don't have to try to dodge that. The Destined Death attack is only dodgeable if you run to his backside. The center of the AoE attack is actually placed a little bit in front of the sword tip, where he stabs it into the ground, so it actually has a pretty far reach out in front of him, meaning that just running away from it actually is just going to get you hit. The AoE is quite a large range. However, because it's in front of the sword, it doesn't actually reach behind him. So if you just run and dodge behind him, you won't get hit, and it actually leaves him pretty open to getting a few hits in. For most of his other attacks, you can actually just dodge them by standing in a proper position, so you don't even need to dodge roll. You can just move to the side, and he'll just miss you, allowing you to continue attacking without burning stamina or time trying to dodge. Now, for Maliketh, all of his attacks are very damaging, and Maliketh likes to keep a lot of pressure on the player, so often a very large challenge with this boss fight is getting into a healing loop. So you take damage, because you took damage, now you're forced to heal, now you try to heal, and he hits you again because you're in the healing animation, and so now you need to heal again, and it just repeats that until you die. Doing a soul level 1 in a roundabout way makes this a little bit easier on you, because if you get hit, you just die. So there's no point in trying to heal. So at this point of the game, a lot of bosses do that, and it's kind of hard to survive any hits, even with like damage reducing items like the Shield Talisman. Kind of forces a lot of your runs to be no hits, or almost no hits. So this is actually the first boss fight that I was able to get to a no hit, which I'm very proud of, that it's Maliketh being the first one, because this is probably one of my favorite boss fights. So there was an instance in this fight where I did get hit by the roar attack, which like knocked me back and staggered me. However, the attack does 0 damage, so I'm not going to count it as a hit. I guess maybe a better term for this would be a no damage run, because my HP was maxed at the end of the fight without healing. But regardless about that, I'm still just going to call it a no hit run, because it's easier that way. Overall, there's almost no way to top this fight. This fight is so much fun. It's just very fast paced. It's such a spectacle to watch. Maliketh has such a amazing design. Like, everything about this boss fight, except the fact that his HP pool is a little bit too small in his phase 2, absolutely outstanding. Like, this boss is why I keep coming back to these games, because I just love fighting these bosses over and over and over. Alright then, Ashen Capital. Well, with that done, we have technically 2 bosses left until the end of the game. There's probably a few other bosses that I'll probably go do first. I think I'll beat Hoaraloo like next, but then after that I'll head towards defeating Melania and Mo. The Ashen Capital unlocked, there's also quite a few talismans that are pretty good that are unlocked at this point, so I'll have to go find those. Ah, Sir Gideon Ofnir.
Ah, I knew you'd come to stand before the Elden Ring, to become Elden Lord. What a sad state of affairs. I commend your spirit, but alas, none shall take the throne. Queen Maliketh has high hopes for us, that we continue to struggle. Unto eternity. My fellow, you fought well.
I do
until
no
now.
voice damage. Oh, I might need to take this in a slightly different way than most other bosses. And here is Sir Gideon Ofnir. This boss fight was pretty annoying. He does a lot of damage, has a lot of attacks, and a lot of the attacks are very hard to dodge. I can't really use the same strategy that I've used for most bosses by getting up and personal, because he will just poise through the claws and just hit me back with an insta-kill of any of his attacks, as he does surprisingly a lot of damage. Instead of trying to use mostly melee, I kind of resorted to just trying to use Carry and Retaliation, plus a little bit of range with the pots and stuff like that. The pots were somewhat effective. They were hard to land a lot of times, as he would just dodge out of the way. So you almost had to like predict where he was going to be, or try to catch him in the middle of an animation to be able to actually damage him. Carry and Retaliation, at least on his spells, does a good amount of damage, even without like upgrading any of your stuff. Surprisingly, does a lot of damage. And this is after the patches to Carry and Retaliation, so no insta-kill Carry and Retaliation anymore. That's gone. This is standard damage. Now, with using Carry and Retaliation, I do have to worry about managing my FP, because I don't really have much to begin with, and Carry and Retaliation kind of requires a decent amount of FP to use. That also means that I have to trade off between blue flasks and the red flasks, so I can't heal as much, and I have a lot less leeway in trying to heal and not take damage, but it took more attempts than I wished with all of the challenges of this boss fight. I was technically even fighting him in a somewhat easier state, because if you beat Mog and Melania, he'll actually use their spells. For every boss you beat, he'll take one of their spells, and I've basically fought him at the first time that I can fight him, without fighting many side bosses. So, I could only imagine what it would be if I actually fought him later on. Now, some of his attacks are kind of annoying to dodge, but some of them can be abused. The beam attack that he does with the Common Azure, he surprisingly actually aims it a little bit lower than you, I guess I could say. So if you're standing on the edge of the staircase that's in the middle of the arena, he'll oftentimes just hit the ledge, and allows you to throw a pot. Now, trying to get him into that position is hard, so it's pretty unreliable to actually do that, but it's something to take a note of. His discs and all of that other stuff, he'll poise through any like light attack, so he'll counter you a lot of times. You could probably use a like a longsword or something like that to try to deal damage, and then poison, because in standard runs, generally you're just going to use a big weapon and just keep him stun locked the entire time, as his poise is pretty low, but it's still there, and so claws and light weapons do not work. Something I could have also done in the beginning of this fight is backstab him while he's doing his monologue. However, that's a one-time thing, and I kind of just want to watch all the cutscenes again, because they're good, and devs put a lot of time into them. It's kind of just nice to watch them. So, you know, overall, not really a fan of Gideon. I don't necessarily like fighting against mages. They're not, like, terrible. Like, there's obviously ways to counter them and all that, but it's just kind of a hassle. Sometimes it's just more of an annoyance to fight them than it is fun to try to counter them. But, I don't know. He's out of the way. You can go on to other bosses. Don't have to come back to him again. And fuck that, man. It's fucking annoying to fight. Especially with low levels. Anyway, that opens up Horlu, which is actually a good fight. I think I might try to beat him, and then after that I'll probably go and try to defeat all of the other Remembrance bosses and just clear out everything else before I defeat the final boss. I want to save that final boss for last. Partially because I think it's going to be the hardest, and partially because I want to just save it for the last. Alright, I think it's finally time for me to take on Rykard. I've been kind of pushing back this fight because I wanted to complete the Volcano Manor quest lines first. There's some of them that require you to go to the mountaintops of the Giants and defeat Hoslow first. And if you defeat Rykard a little bit too early, you can't actually complete that quest line. But now that that's all completed, I think we can just take on Rykard. I don't expect this fight to be too hard. It gives you the Serpent Hunter Spear here, which does a lot of damage regardless of your soul level. So hopefully it's more of a just don't get hit fight rather than a endurance fight. So that should make it a little bit easier. It helped with not getting hit. Just use a little bit of stamina. Also helps because you're just doing a bunch of jumping heavies. So make sure you recover quickly. Yeah, but he can be basically guard broken pretty quickly. Just allows you to get some extra heavies in. Now you can see I don't lock on in this phase. That's mostly just because the lock on just screws with jumping heavies or jumping attacks. Just much easier to actually land them if you're not locked on. There we go. That was easy phase 1. Phase 2 is where it actually gets difficult. A little bit of stamina before then.
Very well. Join myself and King as family. Together we will devour the very god.
Gotta love that cutscene. Now in phase 2, we actually get to start using some of the weapon arts because the stagger set gives us some extra space. Just that extra heavy. seeing it in time. Sometimes with that, whatever, Skull Rain attack that he does, you can like stagger him out of it and it actually doesn't activate. But the attack's not too hard to dodge, you just gotta make sure you keep moving. The skulls basically just make contact with you and then will have a delayed explosion in that location that they made contact in. So as long as you continue moving, they won't actually hit you. And then also he does this stuff where he like charges his attack. As long as you're far away, you don't even have to dodge it. There's two skulls, it's a little bit harder to figure out when to attack. You could technically wait until the skulls go away, but you don't have to. Oh, come on. Why did he stagger forward on that? That's so dumb. Dude, stop going forward! What is your problem? But as you can see, I staggered him out of it twice now. And that allows me to finish him off. Damn, if it wasn't for the fact that he staggered forward for no apparent reason, twice in a row, that would have been a no-hit. Such a dumb way to ruin that no-hit. I do love Rykard, and his fight's really, really cool. It's definitely a better version of what used to be like Yorm with the Storm Ruler and stuff like that, because this fight lasts more than 2 seconds. So, well, now that Rykard's done, we can kind of actually go finish off Zariah's questline.
You're not willing to kill me, are you? You've always been so kind and uncompromising. I suppose I knew in my heart of hearts how kind and uncompromising you always were.
Best girl. Anyway, I think that's all I'll have time for now. We got through quite a lot today. We were able to get through the entirety of Fair Missoula, take out Gideon, set ourselves up for basically the end of the game, with the only ones left being Horaloo and then the Elden Beast. But I think after this, I'm basically going to be going for just knocking out other like side bosses that I've kind of just skipped over, and then just kind of going through and defeating the other Remembrance bosses and stuff like that. From now, most of the bosses have like their path set up. I've gotten like all the bonfires checked off. I've gotten all the weapons and stuff that I would possibly need. So now it's kind of just a boss rush until the end of the game. Just boss after boss and just kind of running through them all. Anyway, since this is all the time that I have left for this part, I will see you in the next video.